One family financed both sides of the Napoleonic Wars and profited from both. They started with nothing in a Jewish ghetto where they weren't even allowed to own land, and ended up owning Europe's central banks. How the Rothschilds built the first global financial empire, and why the myths about them are more dangerous than the truth. Before we go any further, if you're new here, Crown Capital is where we uncover the real stories behind the world's greatest fortunes. Hit subscribe and drop a like. It helps more than you think, and you're going to want to see what's coming next. Frankfurt, Germany, 1744. A boy is born on a street no wider than an alley. The walls around him aren't metaphorical. They are real. Stone. Locked at night. The Judengasse, translated Jews' Lane. The Jews of Frankfurt were confined here by law. They couldn't own property outside its walls. They couldn't walk freely through the city on Sundays or Christian holidays. They were taxed simply for existing in public. At night, the gates were bolted shut. Into this world came Meyer Amschel Rothschild. His father was a cloth and currency trader, scraping by in the narrow lane, surrounded by hundreds of families doing the same thing. When Meyer was just 12 years old, both his parents died of smallpox. He was sent to study at a rabbinical school in Fürth. But fate had other plans. A family friend noticed the boy was brilliant, particularly with coins and numbers. He arranged an apprenticeship at the Oppenheimer Bank in Hanover. Meyer learned quickly, obsessively. He studied rare coins, antique medallions, the way currencies moved, the way money could be made to travel across borders without ever leaving a ledger. By his mid-20s, he was back in Frankfurt, running a small coin and antique dealership from the Judengasse. Unremarkable from the outside. But Meyer was playing a longer game. He had noticed something. The German princes, the Landgraves, were obsessed with rare coins. And among them, the most powerful was Wilhelm IX, the Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel. One of the wealthiest men in Europe. Meyer began sending him rare coin catalogs with prices deliberately set below market value. Not to lose money, to buy access. It worked. By 1769, Meyer Amschel Rothschild had earned the title of court factor to Wilhelm IX, a supplier, an advisor, a trusted man, from the locked ghetto to the court of princes. And this was only the beginning. Meyer Amschel Rothschild had 5 sons, and he did something no family had ever done at that scale. He turned them into a network, deliberately, systematically, like chess pieces placed across a board. Amschel Meyer, the eldest, stayed in Frankfurt to hold the base. Salomon Meyer went to Vienna, the seat of the Habsburg Empire. Nathan Meyer, the sharpest, the most aggressive, crossed the English Channel to London. Kalman Meyer, known as Karl, took Naples. And the youngest, Jakob, who called himself James, planted his flag in Paris. 5 cities, 5 brothers, one family operating with shared intelligence, coordinated capital, and a private courier system. Faster than anything any government had. Before the telegraph, before the telephone, before any concept of a multinational corporation existed. The Rothschilds had already built one. Their father's instructions were simple. Stay connected, share everything. Trust no one outside the family. And always, always think in decades, not years. Meyer Amschel Rothschild died in 1812, having never left the Judengasse. But his sons were already embedded in the financial nerve centers of 5 nations. The machine was just warming up. June 18, 1815. The Battle of Waterloo. Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who had terrorized Europe for 2 decades, faced the Allied armies of Wellington and Blücher on a rain-soaked Belgian field. By nightfall, Napoleon was broken, his Grande Armée shattered. the most powerful military force on the continent, had collapsed in a single day. The question that would change history was not who won. The question was, who found out first? Legend says Nathan Rothschild had carrier pigeons bring him the news a full day before Wellington's official courier reached London. He supposedly rushed to the stock exchange, sold British bonds, sent the market into a panic, and then quietly bought everything back at collapsed prices before the official news arrived. In one day, he is said to have multiplied the family fortune many times over. Here is the truth. Nathan Rothschild did have superior information. His private courier network, built over years, did reach London before the government's official dispatch. He did trade on that information. But the dramatic pigeon story? Embellished, probably fabricated decades later. What is documented and verified by historians, including Niall Ferguson in his landmark work, The House of Rothschild, is that Nathan had built a courier system that consistently gave him faster information than governments. And in finance, faster information is not an advantage. It is the game. The real Waterloo story is not about pigeons. It's about a family that understood information as currency long before anyone else did. After Waterloo, the Rothschilds didn't just participate in European finance. They became the infrastructure of it. Nathan Rothschild in London raised and transferred massive war subsidies to fund Wellington's Peninsular Campaign against Napoleon, a documented operation that involved moving gold across war-torn Europe through Rothschild agents, bypassing French-controlled territories. This was not banking. This was financial logistics at a scale no private entity had ever attempted. When Prussia needed to rebuild after the Napoleonic Wars, the Rothschilds arranged the loans. When Austria needed to suppress revolution in the 1820s, the Rothschilds provided the capital. When Britain needed to finance the abolition of slavery, compensating slave owners in the British West Indies under the 1833 Slavery Abolition Act, it was Nathan Rothschild and his brother-in-law, Moses Montefiore, who arranged a £15 million loan to the British government, the equivalent of over £2 billion today. They didn't serve governments. Governments served them. A French statesman of the era said it plainly. The Rothschilds have established themselves as the treasurers general of all Europe. Let's stop here and let that sink in. At their peak, the Rothschilds controlled wealth equivalent to $2 trillion in today's money. More than Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates combined. One family. No stock market listing, no Forbes profile, no press releases, just capital, and the patience to compound it across generations. Now here is where the story takes a dark and dangerous turn. Because everything you just heard, the ghetto origin, the 5 sons, the Waterloo intelligence, the sovereign loans, is documented history. Remarkable, yes. Extraordinary, absolutely. But real. And then the myths began. In the 19th century, as the Rothschilds' power became visible, a wave of anti-Semitic propaganda swept through Europe. Pamphlets, cartoons, books, all targeting one family name. One of the most widely circulated was an 1846 French pamphlet titled Histoire édifiante et curieuse de Rothschild Ier, Roi des Juifs, translated, The Edifying and Curious History of Rothschild I, King of the Jews. It portrayed Meyer Amschel as a sinister, supernatural force pulling the strings of European civilization. None of it was true, but it spread, because conspiracy theories don't need truth. They need anxiety. And 19th century Europe was drowning in it. Revolutions, industrialization, collapsing monarchies. People needed a face to blame for a world changing faster than they could understand. The Rothschilds became that face, and the myths mutated. By the early 20th century, they had merged with wider anti-Semitic fabrications, including the notorious Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a completely fabricated document exposed as a forgery as early as 1921 by the Times of London, yet still circulated today. The conspiracies claimed the Rothschilds controlled all central banks, all governments, all wars, all media. Here is what the facts actually say. Yes, the Rothschilds were enormously powerful. Yes, they lent money to governments. Yes, they had relationships with monarchs across Europe. That is verifiable history. But the idea that a single family has secretly controlled the global financial system for 200 years, across world wars, revolutions, nationalizations, and the complete restructuring of global finance, is not history. It is mythology, dressed in the clothes of history. And here is why that mythology is dangerous. Because it is almost always anti-Semitic at its root. It reduces the complexity of how power, capital, and institutions actually work into a single scapegoat. It has been used to justify persecution, violence, and genocide. The Nazis didn't just spread Rothschild conspiracy theories. They used them as intellectual cover. In 1938, after the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria, Nazi forces seized the Vienna Rothschild estate and all its assets. Louis von Rothschild, head of the Austrian branch, was arrested and held by the Gestapo for over a year. He was released only after handing over the entire Austrian business operation. The family lost irreplaceable wealth, art, property, capital, built over a century. The real story of the Rothschilds doesn't need conspiracy. The documented truth is already one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of money. The conspiracy exists not to reveal the truth. It exists to hide it. By replacing a complex, verifiable history with a simple, false villain. After World War II, something shifted. The Rothschild name, once proudly displayed across the facades of Europe's most powerful banking houses, began to quietly disappear. The Vienna branch was gone, wiped out by the Nazis. The Frankfurt house had already closed in 1901 when the last male heir of that branch died without succession. And then, in 1981, French President François Mitterrand nationalized the Banque Rothschild as part of a sweeping nationalization of private banks. The French state literally took the family's Paris bank. To outside observers, it looked like the end of an era. It was not. In 1984, the family quietly re-established a new financial institutions in Paris, Rothschild and Cie Bank. They didn't announce it with press conferences. They didn't go on television. They rebuilt in silence. Because by this point, the Rothschilds had learned the most important lesson of multi-generational wealth. Visibility is liability. The families that survive centuries are not the ones who accumulate the most. They are the ones who make the world stop paying attention to them. Going invisible was not a retreat. It was their most sophisticated strategic move in 200 years. Today, Rothschild & Co. is a publicly listed global financial advisory firm on Euronext Paris. It advises on mergers, acquisitions, and restructuring for some of the largest corporations and governments on Earth, quietly, professionally, without drama. In the Médoc region of Bordeaux, two of the world's most prestigious wine estates carry the name Chateau Mouton Rothschild and Chateau Lafite Rothschild, both Premier Cru Classé, both worth hundreds of millions. The family maintains art collections, real estate, private equity interests, and investment activities across multiple continents. They are not the shadowy controllers of global finance that conspiracy theorists describe. They are something more interesting, and in some ways, more impressive. A family that started in a locked ghetto, built the first multinational banking network, financed the reshaping of Europe, survived Napoleonic Wars, anti-Semitic persecution, Nazi asset seizure, and government nationalization, and is still here, not because of secret control, but because of the one asset money can't buy: patience. Here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. Do you think the Rothschilds still secretly control global finance? Or is that just a story we tell because the truth is more boring? Drop your answer below. I'm reading every single comment. If this video gave you something to think about, a like takes 2 seconds, and it puts this story in front of thousands more people. And if you're not subscribed yet, we cover stories like this every week on Crown Capital. Hit subscribe. Don't miss the next one.